And this will be uploaded to the BeefQ website and also to the Royal Welsh website at a later date. Right, I'm going to share my screen. It'll take a little minute to get going. There we go. So as I said, the title of the presentation today is Understanding How Farming Practices Can Influence the Eating Quality of Beef. And you can see down the bottom there all our partners that are involved in the project, and also acknowledging the funding from Welsh Government as well. So some housekeeping to start off with. As I said, the session's being recorded. Please turn off cameras and mute microphones. The Q&A session will be at the end. So please put any questions that you have in the chat throughout the presentation. They can be in Welsh or English, and we'll come back to those questions at the end. So just a reminder of the aims and objectives of BeefQ. Basically, the main aim has been to facilitate the improved eating quality and value of Welsh beef production. That's the overarching aim of the BeefQ project. And there's been a number of key aspects to the work so far. The first has been quantifying the variation in Welsh beef, which has been done. We undertook that survey that you probably would have heard about in previous presentations, of over 2,000 carcasses submitted for slaughter. The second big piece of work that we did was to test beef eating quality with British consumers. And that work has been completed with 1,200 consumers. And we've also tested a carcass grading system to be able to predict eating quality based on that data that we've collected in those two previous exercises. So we now have the tools available to be able to do that. And this part of the project, this last 10 months of the project, is basically engagement with the industry. How could a system such as this work? Is it wanted? Is it needed? We recently undertook a survey, the results of which will be published on the BeefQ website very shortly. So I'm now going to hand over to Deanna to carry on with the rest of the presentation. So you tell me when you want to move the slides on, Deanna.
Thanks, Pip. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining the BeefQ webinar this morning. I guess that, you know, it's been really interesting to be part of the BeefQ project and just to have a look at, you know, where we can have an impact on eating quality all through the supply chain. And we know that all sectors have an impact on beef eating quality, whether or not that's from the producer through like the conception and genetics, through the farm, the transport, and also, as we know, at the abattoir, at fabrication, whether or not that's butchers, and then further through into the retail and food service sector, and indeed the consumer. So we know that all sectors have an impact on eating quality, but what we're concentrating on through this presentation today is through where beef producers can have an impact on eating quality. So we recently went down to Newton Farm in Usk and had a chat to Richard and Tudor Roderick just about some of the points on their farm around really the three broad areas that we know that farmers have an impact. And that is through the genetics, so genetic selection, through the health, so individual animal and whole herd health, and also through the handling of livestock. So while we were down there, we filmed 3 videos, which we've joined up into a single video. And I think now would be a good point just to have a look at those, and I'll delve into a couple of the points raised in the videos when they're finished. So if Pip, did you want to run that video now?
Okay, fingers crossed. Here we go.
Fferm Newton yn cael y bont ar wisg ger Aberhonddu yn fferm gymysg sy'n eiddo i'r teulu Roderick. Mae amryw aelodau prosiect BeefQ wedi dod i ymweld â'r fferm i drafod y cynllun sy'n anelu at gynyddu ansawdd bwyta a gwerth cynhyrchu cigeidion o Gymru.
the maternal side, we very much focus on fertility, milkiness, and fertility, and also calving needs is a really important consideration. When it comes to bull selection, we focus on the EBVs of the bull and look at the growth rates, the rib fat measurements, and the marbling.
That's really interesting, Richard, because we know that all of those traits have some impact on eating quality. We know that growth rate is important because younger, faster growing animals will have a better eating quality. We know that marbling has a positive impact on eating quality because it's beneficial for juiciness and flavour. And we know that rib fat is also important because when an animal is slaughtered, having a fat coverage over the entire carcass prevents the muscles on that carcass from cold shortening in the chiller. So growth rate's also important because it's days to slaughter are important for your margins, as you would know, and it's also better for the animals. You know, if they're grazing for a shorter period, they have a smaller carbon footprint.
As you can see, these cows are incredibly quiet. Docility shows through in them. And I suppose thinking about why we chose this breed type in Wales, you know, we can grow grass and they're incredibly efficient at converting grass into meat.
When we're thinking about breed actually isn't really that important because for all traits, there's more variation within a breed than what there is between breeds. So choosing a type of animal that suits your system is the most important. Choosing something that, you know, suits your landscape and your land and your breeding system is important so that you can produce something that you're happy with and that also that your customer is happy with as well.
Oh, there we go.
Mae iechyd y maith y buwch yn bwysig yn y lle gyntaf oherwydd mae hyn yn helpu fi gynhedlu I gario'r llo I lawn dymor ac I bwydo'r llo ar ôl I fi gael I eni.
Year-wise and eating quality-wise, the greatest potential is determined at conception. Therefore, pre-birth cow nutrition is an important part of eating quality. This is because the number and development of fat and muscle cells can relate then to meat yield and also the potential for marbling in the calf.
Ysgol targed am cyflwr corff y buwch cyn lloia ydy 2,5 masl 5 mewn system lloio Gwanwyn neu 3 masl 5 mewn system lloio Hydref. Y targed am tyfiant llo lan at weaning yw 1 kilo y diwrnod. Mae'n bwysig I bwyso'r llo yn aml fel bod ti'n gallu gwneud rhywbeth amdano fe os ydyn nhw ddim yn tyfu fel dylai nhw.
Weaning is also an important juncture in determining eating quality. We want to minimize stress and also prevent any checks in growth rate.
Mae maith a reolaeth ôl eni yn ogystal â gofal iechyd da yn hanfodol o helpu'r llo gyrraedd ei lawn potensial o ran maint a cynhyrchion. Yna mae'n bwysig I gynnal maith da I sicrhau graddfa tŵr cyson, hunan ground neu borfa in system king.
Ultimately, an animal's health will have an impact on growth rate. Whole herd health is important because it minimizes the risk of illness and also leading to checks in growth rate. We want to ensure consistent growth rate and also to maximize potential growth rate of the calf. Everything else being equal, a younger, faster growing calf will have better eating quality. So do we know in the weeks and days leading up to slaughter, animal handling is important for eating quality. Can you explain your approach to animal handling here at Newton Farm?
Yeah, when handling the cattle, we always do so quietly without making sudden movements or loud noises. We handle them regularly for performance recording. So docility is an important characteristic of which we decide whether to keep or not to keep breeding livestock.
So that calm and consistent handling that you talked about is really important from an eating quality point of view. If animals are handled badly or roughly, it can have an impact on the pH of the meat. And a high pH can lead to what's called dark cutting. And dark cutting is meat that is dark in colour. It's often dry when it's cooked, quite an unusual texture. So not only is that not great for eating quality, but it doesn't look good and it's not great for shelf life either.
We're also careful of how we load and unload cattle on and off the trailer. Again, no sudden movements or loud noises to try and keep them calm.
So the loading and unloading of cattle during transport is really important for eating quality as well. So you want to be handling the animals calmly and consistently to prevent bruising, but also to reduce those stress levels to prevent dark cutting meat.
We try not to mix animals from different bunches. they're going to slaughter within 14 days to reduce the stress levels. We try to keep a tight calving pattern so that animals of a similar age grow up together and are finished together, not mixing large ones with smaller animals.
So glycogen is important in the muscles of the animal to prevent dark cutting meat. And there's two ways of ensuring that. One is through, as we say, reducing stress levels, because stress will quickly use up the glycogen in the muscles. And the other way is to ensure really good nutrition in the month leading up to slaughter.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Pip. So I guess that was just really a quick overview, really, of those three broad areas that where farmers have an impact on managing and impacting on eating quality. So genetics, health, and handling. And I'll just pick out a couple of points really there. I mentioned in the genetics part of that video, talking more about type than breed. And I suppose when we're thinking about genetics is where the potential for an animal's eating quality and indeed its yield is actually set. So the potential is set at conception, and everything that we do from then on can either only maintain or decrease the potential there. And when we're thinking about genetics, it's like I said, it's more about breed type and maturity patterns really than the breed itself. So, thinking more about, larger, faster growing, later maturing animals versus smaller, early maturing, slower growing, type animals. And thinking about those type of animals and what suits your system. So really just bearing in mind when you think about genetics is who is my customer and how can I best meet the requirement of that customer? So thinking about what portion sizes the customer wants, what fat coverage the customer wants, what the amount of marbling that the customer wants, and then thinking about that, and then thinking, what is my system and what genetics or maturity type best suit that system. So less about breed and more about the traits that help you meet the needs of your customer, the type of animal that you need to maximize the marbling potential and the growth potential. So all of those things interact really when we're thinking about genetics and setting the potential for what the eating quality might be. Next slide, Pip. So then once the genetics have been decided, I suppose the next point is maintaining the potential of those animals. And that's where things like the health and the handling of the animals come into it. So we know that management on farm can maintain or lose the potential of those genetics that we've selected. So low stress, freedom from disease, continuous growth rate leads to lower ossification, which is a measure that the eating quality based grading system measures age, I suppose, or a physiological age. So if we can manage all of those things, so keep them free from disease, make sure they don't suffer any growth checks as a result of health incidents, we can go a long way to maintaining the potential of the eating quality of that animal. So it's also building on the breed type. So, making sure that the marbling potential that we've selected in our animals is expressed, making sure that the growth rate potential that we've chosen in our animals is able to be expressed. So the maturity type interacts with the farming system that we have to be able to get the most out of our animals. So health and nutrition and handling is very important to maintaining the potential that we've chosen in the animals. Next slide, please. And the next one really is about sort of immediately pre-slaughter. And pardon the pun, but I can't stress enough how important it is to reduce stress or keep a low stress environment for animals. And that's not just around handling, it is also, you know, health events are a stressful event. But a low stress environment doesn't end at the farm gate. It also links through from the farm to the transport to the abattoir, and then the handling and lairage. And as Pip mentioned in her section of the video, you know, glycogen, which is the energy reserves within an animal, are important to, you know, making sure that, you know, the eating quality is maintained in an animal. And that goes as far pre-slaughter really as 14 days. So ensuring that animals aren't mixed 14 days, keeping similar animals, similar aged animals together, as Tudor was mentioning. Careful, you know, loading and unloading, making sure stocking density is right on the trailer so the animals aren't moving around too much. So all of those things, the stress environment, the things that can be stressful immediately pre-slaughter are important to maintaining the eating quality of an animal. Next slide, please. So why do these things matter, and why should beef producers actually care about these points, you know, in an animal's life and how it links to eating quality? Well, I guess it goes, ultimately the bottom line is that the only money that's in the supply chain, in the beef supply chain, actually comes from the consumer. But what we're finding is a situation where consumers are actually a little bit scared of beef because they get inconsistent results, and often then they blame themselves, because ultimately the consumer is the one who probably cooks the product, or the chef in some instances. So, but what consumers really actually want is just a guaranteed meal solution. You know, they don't always want something fancy. You know, they just want to be able to buy a beef meal that suits an occasion with the price and quality that reflects the value of that occasion. So it shouldn't really be that hard. Beef should be simple to buy with a reliable label, and it shouldn't actually require extensive knowledge if we've produced it and we can describe it in the right way. And we know that butchers and chefs have a key role to play in that, because ultimately they are often the final point of contact between that piece of meat and the consumer eating it. So they've got a key role to play in how the product is cut, so prepared for consumption, how the product is aged post-mortem, how the carcass is hung, and all those kind of things. So they're often the point at which they're giving the product to someone to eat, or advising the consumer on how to cook the product. And we know that if we can get consistent results, we can build trust in the beef product, which will in turn increase sales, and then also in turn increase value in the product. And with these things in mind, I'd like to introduce Tim Rowe from Celtica. Tim is responsible. They supply Celtic Pride beef into the food service sector, and they're often at the point at which they're getting feedback from consumers and chefs on the eating quality of beef. So they understand the importance of providing a consistent eating quality meal solution to consumers. So I'll hand over now to Tim.
Thanks, Pip. And Diana, that was a great introduction. And Diana, really good stuff leading into the reason why we're doing this. We've heard already about the meat science pathway, if you like, on the agricultural side. And Diana's talked a little bit about how that translates into the processing of the animals through the abattoirs and into people like us, food service providers. So as Diana mentioned, I'm a director of Celtic Pride Limited. I'm also meat technology consultant to Celtica Foods and Castellau Foods, and I've been working with Castellau for approximately 20 years now. And you know, obviously, meat quality is a hugely important issue for us. We are one of Wales's, we are Wales's biggest food service provider, independent food service provider. Sorry, can you hear me all right, Pip?
Yes, I can. There's somebody who's not on mute. Could I ask everybody to mute, please? There's a bit of background noise. Carry on, Tim.
Okay. So yeah, we are Wales's largest independent food service provider, and that gives us a particularly unique position in terms of understanding what chefs want in their businesses, and to some degree what retailers do as well, as we have a little bit of retail input as well. We were very involved at the start as Celtic Foods in terms of the practical elements of the project. So myself and my team here at Celtica, along with a lot of help from Deanna and Ileri and others from HCC, we were the ones that put all the 8,400 meat samples together and catalogued those under what we termed post and pick for use at the consumer events, the 20 consumer events that were held. Obviously, all of that data has been gathered now and correlated, and that's been put in the survey, which I hope a lot of you have seen. So really the question is, what do we do with this, I suppose? What do we do with this knowledge and information that we've got? Well, there's a slide up in front of you at the minute, and this is just to show you what they've experienced in Australia. And I totally understand that Australia's situation was very different to us in the UK. But, I'm absolutely sure in the early days of MSA looking at this grading system and the benefits to their industry, they had the same sort of maybe cool response from industry to adopting it, because it is a big change. Fundamentally, it is a big change at how we look at the value of the beef that we produce. But that slide there just tells you that starting from 1999 to approximately 1999, 2000, up until 1920, you can see over a 20-year period, the level of adoption that has taken place, to the point where now, as you can see there, nearly half of all of the adult cattle population of Australia now is graded under the MSA system. So clearly, that's part of the why we might want to do this, I suppose. It's a big step away from what we currently do. If you could move to the next slide, Pip, please. So this is a big part of the reason why. And this is, again, the experience that they had in Australia. So if you look at the bottom line, those are ungraded values. And those are based on, as you can see from the left-hand side, a carcass weight of animals weighing roughly 350 kilos. So they were from very similar sized carcasses. Obviously, we haven't got the grading data, the Europe grading data to go with that. But nonetheless, you can see that, from the ungraded line, starting at a 334 purchase price per kilo, up to super premium, and there's approximately a £300 per carcass cost benefit to those producers. So that's a big reason as to why the industry should seriously look at this, I think, not only from the farming perspective, but also from the processing perspective and the retail perspective as well. Okay, if you can move on, Pip, please. And I suppose the big thing is how do we translate this technology into a language that our customers and consumers will understand? So if you look across the top of that slide, it's telling you how the EQ scores are graded. That's the eating quality scores. So it's basically muscle, or the type of muscle. So that could be sirloin, fillet, top side. It could be strip loin. It could be ribeye. It could be any of those muscles, times the cooking method, times the maturation date, will contribute to an eating quality score. And that converts into a system where you have fail, and that could be set at any level on that parameter that you want it to be. So let's say you might set it around anything 40% or below would be fail. That product could then go into processing, into manufacturing. Anything above the 40% would be either good, better, or best. And the way that you really ascertain those different grades, those different qualities, is in a different way now. We're not looking at a Europe grading. We're looking at grading based on tenderness, flavor, juiciness, and overall liking of the finished product. So that is a fundamental shift from what we currently do. So if we move to the next slide, Pip. I think was there one, Pip, with the Europe sides of beef on? Have we missed that one? Ah, there we go. That's the one I just wanted to show. So fundamentally, we're moving from the part of the slide on the left, which is how the Europe grid is calculated. And you can see from that, that is all based around yield. There's no definition of quality in that at all. It's about the amount of meat yield that will come off those carcasses. If you look to the right of the slide, that's really what our consumer is interested in. And that's the fundamental shift, I think, that we need particularly to be, really getting a grasp of as producers, as processors, is that the consumer, the end consumer, doesn't see the carcasses looking like that on the left of the slide. What they see is what's on the right of the slide. And they are the people that will actually pay for all of this. They're fundamentally, what we charge consumers is how this all gets paid for. So if we could just go back then, Pip, a couple of slides, just back again, there we go. This is, I just found this on a report of the Oxford Farming Conference. I think it was not this year, last year maybe. This was Gavin Hodgson from Sainsbury's. And you can all read what he says at the bottom. Top businesses live and breathe their customers. Everything else leads back to the customer. They live and breathe their consumers. There was another statement made at that conference, which I think was a big beef producer. And he said, if we're going to compete with other meat products or vegetarian dishes, then we need to ensure consistently good eating quality. These are the types of comments that should drive us to looking at very seriously at this means of grading and assessing the quality of carcasses. Okay, Pip, if you could move forward. And obviously, to put that sort of in context, recently we've had the publication of the National Food Strategy, which was authored by Henry Dimbleby and his team. Fundamentally, there was a big statement in there about meat. So this is why we all need to get serious about this. There are a huge number of changes about to be introduced into the agricultural sector, not the least of which is how basic payment scheme operates and single farm payment operates, moving far more towards conservation, far more to environment and away from production, making it even more important, I think, that what we do produce is produced at the very highest standard. As things are at the moment, we've no way of, as a metric of measuring that quality. And I think we do now need that. So, what Henry Dimbleby is proposing a nudging effect towards reduced meat consumption. I believe the figure that he mentions in the food strategy is the same figure that the CCC group, the Climate Change Committee, put forward, which I believe was roughly about 30-35% by, I think, 2032. So this is all imminent. This is all things that, government and big organizations are starting to look at and push towards. I would say that if we as an industry are serious about, our beef farming industry, not only in Wales, but in the UK, then we really have to pay attention to the quality of product that we are finishing and how that relates to the consumer. This is absolutely critical. And we're seeing it with our chefs. We see this week in, week out. We've just gone through probably the most challenging 18 months that I can remember in business. We were slaughtering up to about 50 Celtic Pride cattle a week prior to to lockdown. We went down to 10 a fortnight. What I would say to you is that what we are experiencing is an incredible pickup, and we're almost back up to the numbers now pre-COVID. And all of the interest that we're seeing from our chefs is for higher quality meat. So it's about meat with provenance, which Celtic Pride has. I think it's important that we now add a definitive statement in terms of the quality. So we're going from best guess to a guarantee. And we at Celtica and Castell Food, we think that's pretty critical going forward. So thank you, Pip. That's as much as I've got to say at the moment.
Thank you, Tim. So now we have the opportunity for any questions from people. So I've got two screens going on here, but we'll go to the first question in the chat. You can scroll up. Okay, so David Jarrett said, I get the point on the importance of good handling to reduce stress, always a good thing from a welfare point of view. But is eating quality affected if cattle are stressed when they are young and months off slaughter? So store cattle purchasers may not necessarily know how the cattle have been handled at the farm of birth. David says he thinks the message needs to go out to all cattle producers, not just the finishers. Deanna, do you want to comment there about the handling and stress of young animals?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to take that one, Pip. I guess, David, the thing with stress is, you're right, it's not just immediately pre-slaughter or in the 14 days. So if an animal is stressed for whatever reason, you know, you think about stress yourself. You know, if you're in a stressful situation, you're not focused on you know, maximizing your potential to do anything else, really. So if an animal is, even when it's young, is being handled poorly, whether or not that's through, you know, health events or through handling or whatever the case may be, I think if an animal is stressed, it's not focused on its own production, really. It's you know, it can't really maximize its growth potential. And so I guess potentially, yes, there could be an impact on handling from a very young age, on stressful events from a very young age, on ultimately the animal's ultimate eating quality. So if an animal isn't growing to its maximum potential, then in a way we are depleting the eating quality potential of that animal. So yes, I completely agree. And you know, Tudor mentioned it in his section of the video as well, is, you know, selecting their heifers and their replacements for temperament as well. So it's not just the animals that are going for slaughter. It's when you're thinking about genetics and selection, you know, thinking about, you know, animals with a good temperament, animals that, you know, can manage, you know, stressful events as well. So yes, from a young age, while you may not see that the impact of that stressful event from a young age at the slaughter, so through dark cutting, potentially there could be an impact through the animal not reaching its maximum growth potential because it's stressed for whatever reasons.
Thanks, Deanna. Okay, so the next question there is from Rose. When will the scheme be going live? Will there be any producer groups where suckle calves can be sold to a finisher? I'll take that if you like. Rose, this is very much a development project, and it is very much up to the industry to decide if this is what they want and to take this forward. So in terms of a scheme going live, that's not for this project to take forward. Obviously, we're providing all the tools to be able to take it forward. And Tim, maybe you could comment on the sort of pilot that you guys are thinking of doing with Celtic Pride.
Yeah, absolutely, Pip. Yeah, as I said, it seems to me that what we have to do in the final part of the project now, which is, I think, about sort of 10 months still to run. I think we finish June next year, isn't it? Is to actually start to identify what we're measuring in terms of quality. So one of the things that we're going to look to do at Celtic is that out of every batch of Celtic Pride beef that we bring in, and as I said, we're now killing up to about sort of 40, 45 a week or thereabouts, we'll select 5 or 6 bodies out of that, and then we'll split them left and right sides. We'll grade and cost evaluate one side just purely under Europe and market value, and we'll grade and we'll Europe grade and BeefQ grade the other side, and see if we can achieve extra margins into those products, because we've now got better indications in terms of the quality of the product. Can we get those premiums that we think those products are worth? So that's some really interesting work that we're going to be starting to do now in September. We'll kick off in September. Hopefully that should be a fair amount of data that we'll generate there, because that could well be in the region of sort of, 300-400 carcasses worth of data coming off that. What we also intend to do is to take it a step further and link into a selected group of food service outlets who will give us feedback of their experiences with those products, in their restaurants. So this won't be purely anecdotal. This should be, you know, real-time information that we get back.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, the next question there is from Gareth. Do you think there is space for improving meat eating quality as part of the future sustainable farming scheme in Wales, given that certain farming systems, i.e. genetics or finishing stock earlier, can help reduce emissions? I'm not sure if any of us are experts on policy to comment on that, but Deanna, do you want to comment on the potential for these types of practices that we've talked about today, in terms of sort of the efficiency of production and the potential to finish animals earlier, and the consequences that can have for carbon footprints?
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the other questions that are coming as well from Nia, looking at the feed efficiency as well. So we know that younger, faster growing animals will, all other things being equal, will have a better eating quality. So whatever the farming system is, if we can slaughter animals at a younger age and achieve a good eating quality, then we know that the younger they're slaughtered, really, the lower their carbon footprint will be. So, you know, if they're alive younger, they're producing less, alive shorter, they're producing less methane in a way. So in terms of linking this kind of project to the sustainable farming scheme, you're right, Pip, I can't comment on policy. I don't consider myself well versed enough on that, but certainly any system where, looking at Nia's question, looking at feed efficiency, those kind of things really, I suppose, drive profitability on a farm, which, you know, ultimately is important. We want our farmers to be profitable as well as producing a product that we can eat. So yes, all of the things really that impact on driving potential for eating quality can also have a positive impact on the environment. So, you know, the things that we're selecting for, like, you know, growth rates, you know, as I said, younger, faster growing animals will, you know, will have a better eating quality. And, you know, if we can get them to grow faster and slaughter them younger, then they're going to have a smaller carbon footprint. So, you know, they're not mutually exclusive. They, you know, they do all these points all tie in with each other.
I think it's just worth mentioning as well that we've got one more film left in us, and that is dealing specifically with that issue, is linking, you know, these practices that we've talked about today in terms of improving eating quality, but how they also deliver on other aspects of the sustainable farming scheme as well.
I'm not really that.
Okay, so I hope that addresses that issue, Gareth. I think it does. And that was Nia's question, I think, as well, covered. Heather's got a question: how do you envisage developing a payment mechanism on eating quality? Again, that's not the remit of the project, but we've recently done a survey that you may have seen, asking the industry how they could envisage a type of payment scheme for this type of program. The results of that indicate that it's not a scheme that would, if it was in fact to be implemented, it would complement the Europe grading system rather than replace it. And that's, Deanna, maybe you could describe the experience in Australia, but that's what happens there, isn't it? It's a voluntary scheme that complements the sort of base valuation scheme.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing to say, Pip, is that as part of the consumer taste panels that we did, one of the questions was on willingness to pay. So, you know, all the consumers indicated really that the higher the quality of the product, the more that they would be willing to pay. And that comes back to the point that I, you know, said on my last slide, that if we can gain the trust of the consumer, that we're giving them a consistent eating quality product, that they'll, you know, come back and buy it again. So we're maintaining increasing sales, and through them paying more for better eating quality products, we know we're getting better, more money into the supply chain, which ultimately then feeds back through the supply chain, you know, to the producer. And I guess the payment mechanism in Australia did take time to develop. and each processor will have a different way of, I suppose, managing and delivering that. Ultimately, it will be up to the industry to decide how that is managed. But the only money in the supply chain comes from the consumer. So we need to be giving them something that they like, they want to come back to. It's a consistent result, and we know then that they'll buy more and spend more money on beef to put back into the supply chain. And I think this is one of the things through the project with the test project really with Celtic, is they will see how much more value can be extracted by describing animals based on eating quality and producing that consistent result. And I don't know if Tim might want to comment on that as well.
Yeah, no, I totally concur with what Deanna's got to say. I mean, this is the big sort of question mark against our project, is how do you get this extra premium, and how does it get shared fairly and equally through the supply chain, because it's got to go through the supply chain. But that is going to be the challenge, I suppose, is how we do that in practice. How do you pay a premium to the farmer who has produced you that quality of beef? Because ultimately, as Deanna said, it's the consumer's got to pay for it. It all comes from one pocket, and it's the consumer's pocket. So, I think we're very aware of that. But I just can't help but think, if we go back to the Dimbleby report, if we're going to be encouraged to consume 30-35% less meat over the next 10-15 years, then it's going to be people with the best performing meat that satisfies the consumer the most will probably have the best opportunity in terms of selling and marketing their product. So I think a project like this has real benefit to producers.
Thanks, Tim. Kim Matthews, you've got a question.
Thank you. I think I'm being lazy and not wanting to type it all. It's been a really good sort of roundup of everything that you've been working on, which has been really good. I think that last conversation has just put your finger on it, really. I think. Sorry, I'll put my camera on because it seems rude talking without you being able to see me. I think the kind of supply chain and commercial issues are probably going to be more difficult to deal with than the science and technical issues that you've addressed. So, I really do wish you well with that. I mean, the thrust of what you're saying, as you would expect, I agree with most of that. I'm just slightly perplexed by the comment in one of the videos. I can't remember exactly which one of you said it, about having the right level of fat cover for chilling. That seems slightly back to front to me. I think, you've said elsewhere you should be aiming at what the consumer wants. So I would say probably what you really mean is you would need the right level of fat cover for what the customer wants. And because actually the process is quite capable of adjusting their chilling to avoid cold shortening, to take account of that fat cover. And putting fat on that's only going to be trimmed off is not what we should be aiming for in terms of the environment. And then I'm not going to talk about marbling because we probably have slightly different perspective on that. I think we put too much emphasis on marbling sometimes. But just that rib fat cover, I'm interested in any further thoughts you might want to add around that one.
Deanna, do you want to comment on that?
No, I'm happy to take that. I suppose the comment on rib fat, and I do take your point on processors being able to adjust the chilling, but I guess the fat cover is really a minimum fat cover, so, and across the body. So, we know that, if animals are too lean, regardless of the chilling, there is a potential for the outside of the muscle, maybe not the inside of the muscle, to cold shorten. And as you know, we can adjust the electrical, or the processors can adjust the electrical inputs to try and manage the pH decline. But, we know that we need a minimum of 3 mils fat cover over the carcass. So we're not talking about excessive fat cover, really. We're talking about a minimum fat cover over the carcass of about 3 mils. to protect that the outer part of the muscle against cold shortening, which ultimately then leads to producing something that the consumer wants. So it's it's not there as a we want fat because it's fun to have. We want fat because it's a we know that there's an impact in within processing. So we're not talking excessive amounts, but certainly managing that amount and having a minimum amount protects the muscles.
Thanks. That's
and I take your point also about marbling as well. Marbling is and we may as well address it now. Marbling does have a positive impact on eating quality through juiciness and flavour, but we also know that genetically and production-wise, it's probably the hardest trait to get to express in an animal and can be expensive, and that's it won't suit all systems. So a grass-based system, chasing marbling, it's expensive to probably get genetically, and also to to be able to express that through a grass-based production system. But we know it has a positive impact on eating quality, so it is measured as part of an eating quality-based grading system. But it is just one point within the that chain that we know has an impact. So.
Thanks, Deanna. The next question from David Jarrett is kind of related to that, Deanna, so you might want to take this one as well. He said he gets the point on younger cattle and finishing stock earlier, but it says, remember, we are finishing on grass, and is there a danger that eating quality could be compromised through under finishing if we go by age, so trying to finish animals earlier on grass?
Yeah, and again, it's coming back to the type, David. So we you want to be maximizing the potential of an animal through genetic management, through the management of genetics, and also based on your production system. So if you've got a system that best manages slower growing, early maturing animals, or faster growing, heavier animals, then you need to work with your system. There's no point in fighting the system. And it's age, like marbling, and I was saying earlier, is just one of the points, and it's not age per se. So it's not chronological age, it's physiological age, which we measure by ossification, which is that when the cartilage in the spine turns to, ossifies, turns to bone, and then looking at the growth rate as well. So yes, not all systems and not all customers will be so focused on, like a fast growing animal, and getting them off at a young age. You need to work with the system and maximize what you can do on your system. So not all types of animals will suit all systems, but if you look at your system, so if you're talking about, grass finished system in Wales, then look at the animals that best suit that system. Look at the maturity type of the animals that best suit the system. So whatever type and whatever breed, look at animals regardless that are going to be faster growing on that system to maximize the genetic potential that you've gone with.
Great, thank you, Deanna. Can I bring Mike George in, please, just because we've got a couple of questions for him. Mike, Deanna and Tim have mentioned consistency of eating quality. You're on both sides of the fence in that you're a cattle producer and you're also a manufacturer. Can you sort of explain how important consistency of that product is for you from a manufacturing point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. So we manufacture beef biltong, which is a form of cured and dried beef. And ideally, the overarching aim of that business is to find consumers who value good quality beef and turn them from a first-time customer into regular repeat purchasers and make it part of their regular diet. So obviously we put a lot of effort, investment into acquiring customers, and after that we want to make sure that every time they purchase our product they're getting a similar product, something that they expect. They're not having a bit of a lottery in terms of each time they purchase, especially because what we are producing is a ready-to-eat product. There's no cooking process that the consumer has. So, you know, as we produce, it needs to be as close to the same every single time. And again, because we're not producing sort of a minced and reformed product like a sausage or a burger, we can't tweak that fat and protein ratio beyond sort of trimming the meat. And you know, I think it's important to note as well that in terms of getting the extra cost from the consumer, I think we're on the assumption that this consumer has elected they want to buy a beef product anyway, which is going to be is always going to be a higher purchase price than sort of some other ingredients. So that actual premium to go to a high quality beef product is probably only a small proportion. And if that gives them the reassurance that they're going to get the same results every time, and it's not going to be something they buy and underwhelms them, then that's actually going to be quite a small investment for them to kind of give them a bit of a guarantee. And from the farming side, I definitely think, you know, there's a benefit to having an incentive to finish animals when that particular animal is best suited, and not sort of chasing an arbitrary dead weight target, you know, because you will have animals with smaller or bigger frames where if you were just pushing for a finished dead weight, that might mean, you know, finishing smaller animals too fat or larger animals too lean. So I think there's definitely a potential advantage to having another quantitative process where actually the eating quality can be taken into account as opposed to just the weight.
Great, thank you, Mike.
No problem.
There's a bit of a conversation going on in the chat about selecting the right animal for the farming system, but I'll just let that run because that seems to be being answered quite well. Gareth, can I bring you in, please? Gareth is a purchaser for Celtic Pride, so he's going out on farm, talking with farmers, working with farmers to select the best animals going into Celtic Pride. Gareth, this eating qualities data that would deliver this type of eating quality system is very different from what we're used to. There's a lot more data available. How do you think you could use that within Celtic Pride to improve the eating quality of the animals that you're sourcing?
Well, I think, good morning all, bore da I chi gyd. As much information as we can gather and relate it back to the producer or the farmer that's producing the beef, it's important that we get them to know what marble score is in their carcasses so that they can look back onto the genetics of the animals from birth forward until to slaughter. And so we need to get that information back to the farmer as much as we can so that they can follow up from start to the finish of the animal. And for the eating quality, the health planning of the animal as well, that you know, docile animals, and when they're growing, that they do a consistent growth and not they're fluctuating during the finishing period as well, because you need a consistent growth and a finishing aspect to the animal. And also that comes through then to the processing, so we can monitor that from ourselves. So it's consistently from the birth of the animal straight through to the end process. And we need to share, as I said before, share as much information to the farmers as we can. Great, thank you. Tim, do you want to come in and say something from the processor side of things? Because obviously you see the other side of those animals post-slaughter as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as I said, it's nearly 20 years that Celtic Pride Limited has been running now. We initiated it in 2003, and it was all about trying to get the best quality meat that we could for our salespeople to take out there into the food service sector. And we worked very closely with Aberystwyth University at the time to look at the production criteria that would influence that. So we had a protocol that, meant that we only had 4 movements in the lifetime of that animal, because there was plenty of science papers written to suggest that each time you move an animal, it takes the animal sort of 6-7 weeks to settle back down, and it interrupts, as Diana mentioned earlier on, in very, very clearly, it interrupts the growth plane of that animal through its lifetime. So, we were very involved in doing that, and as Gareth mentioned, we've always fed back to the farmer with that information so that they're able to influence, the way that they produce. Mike will know that. We work very closely with Julian. We've taken a lot of cattle off Julian, his dad, over the years. And it's that sort of close working relationship with the producer group that we've always encouraged. Our Celtic Pride brand is all based around grassland, basically. And the reason we did that was because the one thing that we do super well in the UK is grow grass, and particularly in Wales. So we've got plenty of really good, high quality feed available. I think what Diana mentioned earlier is absolutely bang on, and it's the selection of the type of animal you're going to farm with to suit your farming, your farm and your farming potential is the critical thing. And I think what we're all heading towards is that somewhere along the line, somebody is going to draw up some sort of table, some sort of metric system that will measure all of these things, eating quality against environmental impact, to get almost like a sustainability metric. That surely is not too far down the path, I think. And I think we're all talking from the same, or singing from the same hymn sheet, I think. And it's just which part of that that supply chain you work at. But we at Celtic Pride have always tried to interact and give all of that information back to our farmers to allow them to do as good a job as they can do, and also to mitigate some of the elements that stress has on animals when they go through to slaughter, loading, unloading, where they're placed in lairages, who they're mixed with at those lairages. Gareth has spent a lot of years policing that and trying to make sure that that's not an issue for us. So yeah, really important stuff, Pip, really, really important.
Great, thank you very much. I'm conscious it's 11 o'clock, so we'll wrap it up there. Thank you very much to our speakers, Tim and Diana. Thanks also to Mike and Gareth for being involved in the question and answer session. Any questions that haven't been answered in the chat, we'll post answers through social media, but also on our BeefQ website. I think there's a couple in there that we haven't got to. But thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today, and go out and enjoy the sunshine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pip.
Cheers, thank you. I'll stop the recording there.